So just for online, if you can say the where we are again, if that's okay.
So we're on chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita, number 54.
Thank you.
And Sue will read.
Okay, are you?
Let me screen share for you. Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm reading from my book, and one thing you should be aware of is that my book has some very slight changes. Same author, same interpretation, but I've noticed there's a couple of slight changes.
Yeah, it's okay. I follow along too. It's just a little bit.
Okay, so text 54. Brahma Bhuta Prasana Ma Naskoti Na Kansati Sama Sarvezu Bhutesu Matbhaktum Labate Param. One who is thus transcendentally situated at once realizes the supreme Brahman. He never laments nor desires to have anything. He is equally disposed to every living entity. In that state, he attains pure devotional service unto me. To the impersonalist, achieving the Brahma Bhuta stage, becoming one with the Absolute, is the last word. But for the personalist or pure devotee, one has to go still further to become engaged in pure devotional service. This means that one who is engaged in pure devotional service to the Supreme Lord is already in a state of liberation called Brahma Bhuta, oneness with the Absolute. Without being one with the Supreme, the Absolute, one cannot render service unto him. In the Absolute conception, there is no difference between the served and the servitor. Yet the distinction is there in a higher spiritual sense. In the material concept of life, when one works for sense gratification, there is misery. But in the absolute world, when one is engaged in pure devotional service, there is no misery. The devotee in Krishna consciousness has nothing to lament or desire. Since God is full, a living entity who is engaged in God's service in Krishna consciousness becomes also full in himself. He is just like a river cleansed of all dirty water. Because a pure devotee has no thought other than Krishna, he is naturally always joyful. He does not lament for any material loss or gain because he is full in the service of the Lord. He has no desire for material enjoyment because he knows that every living entity is the fragmental part and parcel of the Supreme Lord and therefore eternally a servant. He does not see in the material world someone is higher and someone is lower. Higher and lower positions are ephemeral, and a devotee has nothing to do with ephemeral appearances or disappearances. For him, stone and gold are of equal value. This is the Brahma Bhuta stage, and this stage is attained very easily by the pure devotee. In that stage of existence, the idea of becoming one with the Supreme Brahman and annihilating one's individuality becomes hellish, and the idea of attaining the heavenly kingdom becomes phantasmagoria, and the senses are like broken serpent's teeth. As there is no fear of a serpent with broken teeth, so there is no fear from the senses when they are automatically controlled. The world is miserable for the materially infected person, but for a devotee, the entire world is as good as Vaikuntha, or the spiritual sky. The highest personality in this material universe is no more significant than an ant for a devotee. Such a stage can be achieved by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, who preached pure devotional service in this age. Text 55. Bhakya mam abhajanati yavanyas kasmi tatvata tatumam tatvato nyatva visatitad anataram. One can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord by such devotion, he can enter into the kingdom of God. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, and his plenary portions cannot be understood by mental speculation, nor by non-devotees. If anyone wants to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he has to take to pure devotional service under the guidance of a pure devotee. Otherwise, the truth of the Supreme Personality of Godhead will always be hidden. It is already stated Naham Prakasa, that he is not revealed to everyone. Everyone cannot understand God simply by erudite scholarship or mental speculation. Only one who is actually engaged in Krishna consciousness and devotional service can understand what Krishna is. University degrees are not helpful. One who is fully conversant with the Krishna science becomes eligible to enter into the spiritual kingdom, the abode of Krishna. Becoming a Brahmin does not mean that one loses his identity. Devotional service is there, and as long as devotional service exists, there must be God, the devotee, and the process of devotional service. Such knowledge is never vanquished, even after liberation. Liberation involves getting free from the concept of material life. In spiritual life, the same distinction is there, the same individuality is there, but in pure Krishna consciousness. One should not misunderstand that the word visati, enter into me, supports the monist theory that one becomes homogeneous with the impersonal Brahman. No, visati means that one can enter into the abode of the Supreme Lord in his individuality to engage in his association and render services unto him. For instance, a green bird enters a green tree, not to become one with the tree, but to enjoy the fruits of the tree. Impersonalists generally give the example of a river flowing into an ocean and merging. This may be a source of happiness for the impersonalist, but the personalist keeps his personal individuality like an aquatic in the ocean. We find so many living entities within the ocean if we go deep. Surface acquaintance with the ocean is not sufficient. One must have complete knowledge of the aquatics living in the ocean depths. Because of his pure devotional service, a devotee can understand the transcendental qualities and the opulences of the Supreme Lord in truth. As it is stated in the 11th chapter, only by devotional service can one understand. The same is confirmed here. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by devotional service and enter into his kingdom. After attainment of the Brahma Bhuta stage of freedom from material conceptions, devotional service begins by one's hearing about the Lord. When one hears about the Supreme Lord, automatically the Brahma Bhuta stage develops, and material contamination, greediness, and lust for sense enjoyment disappears. As lust and desires disappear from the heart of a devotee, he becomes more attached to the service of the Lord, and by such attachment, he becomes free from material contamination. In that state of life, he can understand the Supreme Lord. This is the statement of Srimad Bhagavatam also. Also, after liberation, the process of bhakti or transcendental service continues. The Vedantam Sutra confirms this. Aprayanyat tatrapi hi drishtam. This means that after liberation, the process of devotional service continues. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, real devotional liberation is defined as the reinstatement of the living entity in his own identity, his own constitutional position. The constitutional position is already explained. Every living entity is the part and parcel fragmental portion of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, his constitutional position is to serve. After liberation, this service is never stopped. Actual liberation is getting free from misconceptions of life. Text 56. Sarva karmani api sada kurvano mad vapasraya mat prasadid avapanoti sasvatam padam avayam. Though engaged in all kinds of activities, my devotee, under my protection, reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. The word Mad Vapasraya means under the protection of the Supreme Lord. To be free from material contamination, A pure devotee acts under the direction of the Supreme Lord or his representative, the spiritual master. There is no time limitation for a pure devotee. He is always 24 hours, 100% engaged in activities under the direction of the Supreme Lord. To a devotee who is thus engaged in Krishna consciousness, the Lord is very, very kind. In spite of all difficulties, he is eventually placed in the transcendental abode, or Krishnaloka. He is guaranteed entrance there. There is no doubt about it. In that supreme abode, there is no change. Everything is eternal, imperishable, and full of knowledge. Text 57. Satasa sarva karmani maya sanyasa matpara buddhi yogam upasriya maksita satatam bhava. In all activities, just depend upon me and work always under my protection. In such devotional service, be fully conscious of me. When one acts in Krishna consciousness, he does not act as the master of the world. Just like a servant, one should act fully under the direction of the Supreme Lord. A servant has no individual independence. He acts only on the order of the master. A servant acting on behalf of the Supreme Master has no affection for profit and loss. He simply discharges his duty faithfully in terms of the order of the Lord. Now, one may argue that Arjuna was acting under the personal direction of Krishna, but when Krishna is not present, how should one act? If one acts according to the direction of Krishna in this book, as well as under the guidance of the representative of Krishna, then the result will be the same. The Sanskrit word matpara is very important in this verse. It indicates that one has no goal in life save and except acting in Krishna consciousness just to satisfy Krishna. And while working in that way, one should think of Krishna only. I have been appointed to discharge this particular duty by Krishna. While acting in such a way, one naturally has to think of Krishna. This is perfect Krishna consciousness. One should, however, note that after doing something whimsically, he should not offer the result to the Supreme Lord. That sort of duty is not in the devotional service of Krishna consciousness. One should act according to the order of Krishna. This is a very important point. That order of Krishna becomes through disciplic succession from the bona fide that order of Krishna comes through disciplic succession from the bona fide spiritual master. Therefore, the spiritual master's order should be taken as the prime duty of life. If one gets a bona fide spiritual master and acts according to his direction, then his perfection of life in Krishna consciousness is guaranteed. Text 58. Maksita sarva durgani mat prasadat tarisyasi akas sativam ahakaran na srovyasi vinan vinak yasi. If you become conscious of me, you will pass over all the obstacles of conditional life by my grace. If, however, you do not work in such consciousness, but act through false ego, not hearing me, you will be lost. A person in full Krishna consciousness is not unduly anxious to execute the duties of his existence. The foolish cannot understand this great freedom from all anxiety. For one who acts in Krishna consciousness, Lord Krishna becomes the most intimate friend. He always looks after his friend's comfort, and he gives himself to his friend, who is so devotedly engaged working 24 hours a day to please the Lord. Therefore, no one should be carried away by the false ego of the bodily concept of life. One should not falsely think himself independent of the laws of material nature or free to act. He's already under strict material laws. But as soon as he acts in Krishna consciousness, he is liberated, free from the material perplexities. One should note very carefully that one who is not active in Krishna consciousness is losing himself in the material whirlpool and the ocean of birth and death. No conditioned soul actually knows what is to be done and what is not to be done. But a person who acts in Krishna consciousness is free to act because everything is prompted by Krishna from within and confirmed by the spiritual master. Text 59. Yarahan karam asritya nayotsa iti manyasi mithyasya vayavasaite praktis devam niyoksati. If you do not act according to my direction and do not fight, then you will be falsely directed. By your nature, you will have to be engaged in warfare. Arjuna was a military man and born of the nature of the Kshatriya. Therefore, his natural duty was to fight. But due to false ego, he was fearing that by killing his teacher, grandfather, and friends, there would be sinful reactions. Actually, he was considering himself master of his actions, as if he were directing the good and bad results of such work. He forgot that the Supreme Personality of Godhead was present there, instructing him to fight. That is the forgetfulness of the conditioned soul. The Supreme Personality gives directions as to what is good and bad, and one simply has to act in Krishna consciousness to attain perfection of life. No one can ascertain his destiny as the Supreme Lord can. Therefore, the best course is to take direction from the Supreme Lord and act. No one should neglect the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead or the order of the Supreme Spiritual Master, who is the representative of God. One should act unhesitatingly to execute the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That will keep him safe under all circumstances. Text 60. Swabhava Yena Kanteya Nibaha Svena Karmana Kartum Nakasi Yan Mohat Karisyasti Avaso Pitat. Under illusion, you are now declining to act according to my direction, but compelled by your own nature, you will act all the same, O son of Kunti. If one refuses to act under the direction of the Supreme Lord, then he is compelled to act by the modes in which he is situated. Everyone is under the spell of a particular combination of the modes of nature and is acting in that way. But anyone who voluntarily engages himself under the direction of the Supreme Lord becomes glorious. Text 61. Isvara Sarva Bhutanam Pradesi Rajuna Tishati Brahmayam Sarva Bhutani Yantra Rudi Hani Mayaya. The Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities, who are seated as on a machine made of the material energy. Arjuna was not the supreme knower, and his decision to fight or not to fight was confined to his limited discretion. Lord Krishna instructed that the individual is not all in all. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, or he himself, Krishna, the localized supersoul, sits in the heart directing the living being. After changing bodies, the living entity forgets his past deeds, but the supersoul, as the knower of the past, present, and future, remains the witness of all his activities. Therefore, all the activities of living entities are directed by the supersoul. The living entity gets what he deserves and is carried by the material body, which is created in the material energy under the direction of the supersoul. As soon as a living entity is placed in a particular type of body, he has to work under the spell of that bodily situation. A person seated in a high-speed motor car goes faster than one seated in a slower car, though the living entities, the drivers, may be the same. Similarly, by the order of the Supreme Soul, material nature fashions a particular type of body to a particular type of living entity to work according to his past desires. The living entity is not independent. One should not think himself independent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The individual is always under his control. Therefore, his duty is to surrender, and that is the injunction of the next verse. Text 62. Tameva saramnam gotcha sarva bhavina bharata tat prasad param satim tanam prastyasi savatam. O Skyam of Bharata, surrender unto him utterly. By his grace, you will attain transcendental peace in the supreme and eternal abode. A living entity should therefore surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in everyone's heart, and that will relieve him from all kinds of miseries of this material existence. By such surrender, one will not only be released from all miseries in this life, but at the end, he will reach the Supreme God. The transcendental world is described in the Vedic literature as Tadvisno Paraman Padam. Since all of creation is the kingdom of God, everything material is actually spiritual. But Paramam Padam specifically refers to the external abode, which is called the spiritual sky or Vaikuntha. In the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, it is stated, Sarvasya kaham hridi sanasvista. The Lord is seated in everyone's heart. So this recommendation that one should surrender onto the Supersoul sitting within means that one should surrender onto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Krishna has already been accepted by Arjuna as the Supreme. He was accepted in the 10th chapter as Param Brahman Param Dhama. Arjuna has accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the supreme abode of all living entities, not only because of his personal experience, but also because of the evidences of great authorities like Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyasa. Should we stop here?
I think so.
Okay, so that's text 63.
Okay, thank you so much. I
Well-
love listening to you read this book.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I didn't realize how much I missed reading.
All I think about when you read is how lucky your grandson is that he has you to read to him.
Yes, Pam, because there's nothing like a dramatic reading of Chicka Chicka Boom Boom to light up your face. That was one of my favorite things when I was a teacher and when I was a mom. From the day my kids were born, I started reading to them because it gave me such pleasure. Too bad if they had trouble with it. I liked it. So it was fun.
Yeah.
You know, one thing that kind of crept through when I was reading this, and I know it's been said over and over again, but it really crept through, was the difference between thinking that, and I'm going to say this wrong, so forgive me, but the difference between thinking that when you are died, you are kind of sucked up and absorbed in this oceanic super soul and you are no more. And what he said that came through for me this time very clearly was that you have this micro soul, which is sort of a tiny little bit of the super soul. It doesn't disappear when you become a part of the super soul. You're still, in other words, you still have your individual consciousness while you are a part of this big overwhelming super soul. And for some reason that kind of reached me on a different level today. So that was, you're not giving yourself up when you are absorbed and assumed by the super soul, when you surrender to the super soul. So that, Pam, you said this before, how sometimes you're ready to hear something. And so that reached me today.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. I told you guys I'm rereading Brene Brown's Gifts of Imperfection. And yeah, I read 2 chapters yesterday because she's doing like a weekly book club podcast with her sisters. So I read the 2 chapters that go along with this week's podcast. And she talks about faith in here and how it all ties together. And I don't think the first time I read that book, it resonated with me. And because I'm reading the Gita now, I'm able to have an open heart toward this idea of faith. So I hear what you're saying. Like sometimes we hear things over and over again. We're not ready to hear them. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, duh. Or whatever.
Yeah, no doubt.
Whatever.
Yes, yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that kind of resonated was and to be frank, I'm not sure that I believe this, and I certainly don't have the kind of faith that Brown is talking about, but that surrender doesn't necessarily mean giving up your individuality in a cult-like fashion, but everybody talks about it's important to think about what really matters and to evaluate what really matters. And surrender perhaps means letting all those evaluations go and just discarding all of the evaluations about what matters and doesn't matter that come out of the material world. And some of those can be very good sounding and very compassionate sounding, letting all of those go and just letting whatever bubbles up within you decide what is good and worthwhile and what is not good and worthwhile. I mean, the message in the book is that it's Krishna that's bubbling up within you, but
if I go back to Amanda's interpretation though of universal energy versus Krishna, like instead of personalizing it or personifying it, like even this example of this week, like I was thinking about it last night when I was laying on the couch. I'm like, my goodness, I have like no responsibilities in life. I don't have any children. I have no parents to take care of. Like I'm not a caretaker and above or below me. It's just me I have to take care of. And this week when I was first coming here to care for his dad for a week, I was like, and his dad's a very Catholic person, I was like, let me just channel that energy, not the Catholic energy, but like just this idea of doing it for something larger than myself. And that used to never exist for me. Like just this idea that stop making this week so personal, like, oh, I'm not going to be home for 10 days. And once I did that, it was like, and that's where I'm tying like the faith part of it in, like the idea of doing something for something other than myself and doing it for like the greater, bigger thing. So that's how I was able to find a little bit more comfort and peace this week, I guess. And I don't know if I'm just faking it till I make it.
When you were saying that, I thought of another thing that cropped up today that hasn't been really emphasized, or if it has, I missed it. Either wasn't there or just went right over my head, was the importance of the spiritual master. That was mentioned several times in the Shlokas from today.
Yeah, and because I'm taking that Gita course, I was catching up. I'm on chapter 9 and 10 from that. So I'm like backtracking. And there was a reminder, not in this book, but in one of the other 2 books I'm following along with, of like the importance of surrounding yourself with people doing this work. Like, I can't remember where we heard the example, but like if you're trying to learn another language, if you don't really immerse yourself in that culture, it's going to be really hard for you to learn that language. So finding a spiritual master, but also like I think it's hard for me to do this work because my people and I don't sit around talking about this. Like I now have my people that are in the yoga community and we'll sit and talk about yoga philosophy and stuff, but we don't really go down the Gita road. So I think it's important, like finding a master, and if this is something you really want to study more, and finding your like how we meet every morning. Like you guys have become my people for this. But they said that's an important part of the bhakti tradition, is having people in your circle that you guys just talk about Krishna all day long. Like everything you do is for Krishna or whatever, universal energy or whatever word you want to put there. So I was like, no wonder why it doesn't work for me.
Yeah, everything you're saying is like so right on. I just wanted to add it that like in my experience of I never initiated, but coming into the culture, you know, I guess I sort of like had a certain relationship where I could act a certain way with somebody I considered superior, like my parents or something. And I was a little snot, you know, I wouldn't be respectful, and, you know, I do what I wanted, and it, like learning these things and then practicing them on somebody who I did consider my teacher. And like, I guess like a master of spirituality beyond my understanding. So I could call him a spiritual master. Like it humbled me, and it sort of, it changed the way I related to people in a less egoic way. You know, it forced me to take myself out of the center. And I think that's very healthy for Americans, I guess human beings in general, but definitely, you know, I was very immersed in that like me culture, and taking myself out of the center. I don't think I'd be able to do the kind of work that I do if it was primarily about myself. You know what I mean? Like that was what was most beneficial for me, because I'm the kind of person who can like sit and read the book and learn it, but I kind of needed someone to like relationally show me. Like how do you, and that's what bhakti is cool. Like, you know, I was on the Jnana path. So the Jnana path is very individualistic, and it's sort of like do it on your own. You're born alone, you're gonna die alone. And you know, so like with bhakti, it's like you're not alone, you're in community. How do you relate to community? Like how do you relate to your superiors? How do you, that idea that he was talking about being a servant, like not in a demeaning way, because everyone's a servant to everyone else in the community. Everyone's so kind and gentle, and it's almost like if you put others before yourself, again, not in a demeaning way, when you recognize that like the community is the self. I don't know if I'm going on like a unrecognizable tangent here, but like, so with the studio, right? Like when we do one thing for the studio, if I thought like, well, that's just going to benefit me, so I'm doing it, it wouldn't go as far as it would if I say to myself, I'm doing this for the community. I'm serving the community, and then other people in the community are doing it for the community. Then everybody's uplifting the community collectively.
Yeah.
Right. And if like Krishna or, you know, this universal energy is present in every single person, then I know everyone I meet, I'm supposed to serve in that capacity. And I wouldn't be capable of that if I didn't have a teacher to sort of give me the opportunity to practice that relationally. You know, like he would mess up, not show up, forget to, you know, and like normal business world, it would sort of be like, well, then, you know, I'm cutting them off and, you know, not paying or whatever. And it was sort of like, no, this is my teacher. It's okay. People make mistakes. No, this is my teacher. Like I have to serve. How can I serve? Like what gifts can I bring? How can I just like sit in the presence of this person who's giving me so much knowledge and so much peace through the knowledge that he's giving, you know? So it was healthy for me to do that. And that changed my relationship to my parents and healed my relationship with my parents. And it definitely healed my relationship to anybody that I meet in the world, I think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Yeah, taking me out of the equation.
Right, like it's that subtle underlayer that we don't realize is happening until it happens.
Well, and another thing I read in that Brene Brown book, which is such like a modern female complementary piece to reading the Gita for me. And to be fair, I'm biased toward this book because it's one of my favorite books. But she talks about not just learning love. Like, I thought about that Jnana path. Like, you can learn all these emotions and feelings like love and everything, but until you start really practicing them, they don't do anything. So sometimes, like, you can learn these, but if you don't have a teacher that's showing you how to do, like, I can teach a student how to get into the most perfect down dog when they're in class. But if I can't teach them how to do it when they need it most in life on their own, then what kind of teacher am I? I'm just like a dictator. So it's like, you need you need a teacher that's going to teach you the material, but also make it applicable in their life. And I think that's an important part of this Gita practice, because like, we can learn this all day, but until I start applying it in my life, it's just more knowledge. And that's what I think they talk about, like the college education thing. Like, I could have a college degree in learning the Gita, but for me, I have to incorporate it into my life.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and incorporating, yeah, and that's all about incorporating it into relationships. Like, I'm friendly with somebody who would like literally teach the course on the Gita in colleges, and I would, sit in on his lectures and everything, but it wasn't until like he started inviting me over to his house.
Yeah.
And I saw like the way that he interacted so sweetly with his students, and anytime I had a question for him, it was like, I guess as humans, we're so impressionable by others' example. Like, we morph. What is it? Then the group think, right? Like, whoever you're hanging around with, you're going to start to become like. So if you see these people further along on the path, like, it's just sort of the cheat. It's the or we'll go back to that analogy of the elevator.
Yeah.
It's the elevator up. Like, just surround yourself with, and that's what my teacher always said to me. He's like, just find someone who's further along on the path and hang around with those people, and you're just going to become like them seamlessly. There's like not even that big of an effort, because you'll mess up and then you'll be like, oh, this doesn't fit in with what the group is doing, right? Usually the group is doing something awful in our culture and you're following along with that. But like, I don't know what I've experienced with this current incarnation of the Bhakti culture. I know previous incarnations may not have been as auspicious, but this current incarnation, they're just so kind and so sweet and so attentive. And it's definitely like, over years of being exposed to that, has changed a lot for me.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's 8:17, so should do breath, unless anyone has anything else. We can meditate. All right. So we'll sit up nice and tall. Create some nostril breath. Breathing in and out through the nose, creating longer breath in, deeper breath out, filling up the low belly as you inhale. And letting all the air out as you exhale. Relaxing features on the face, the shoulders. Finding that one point of focus externally or internally. And then bring your right hand over to the face, close the right nostril with the thumb, inhale through the left. Close left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. Inhale left. Close left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. Inhale left. Close left, exhale right. Inhale right. Close right, exhale left. A few more rounds on your own breath. When you're done, you'll exhale out the left side. There's no rush. I'm setting the timer and you'll join us when you're ready. Bringing hands to heart center. Namaste.